welcome to another session of our Division 45 mentorship session. And this is another Saturday morning, and we welcome Dr. Brionez to join us talking about psychology licensure. And we're very excited to have him on board, and he is recently licensed. So congratulations. To start our session, I'll provide a very brief introduction about myself and Dr. Brionez, and we will jump ahead into our session today. So my name is Yue Li. I am a fourth-year doctoral candidate in the counseling psychology program at Indiana University, Bloomington. Dr. Brionez is a licensed psychologist who works at the University of Wyoming's University Counseling Center. Dr. Brionez is an APA Minority Fellowship Scholar with research interests in suicidology in rural and ethnic and sexual minority populations. And I will give the space to Dr. Brionez to give us a little bit more introduction about your personal and professional background up until this point.
And Yue, thank you very much for inviting me to speak this morning, so thank you. I'll just give a brief synopsis. I started out volunteering for a crisis hotline and in California. I'm from California. And then from there, I joined San Francisco Suicide Prevention Hotline, and then went to college at San Francisco State University and majoring in psychology. And after my post-bac, I went to AmeriCorps in Montana, which is where I got more involved in suicide research and talking with people in the rural areas about suicide risk. And from there, I went to school for my master's at Montana State University, and then earned my doctorate degree at the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks. Along the way, I did practicum at mostly college counseling centers, and also a behavioral health rotation at a hospital as well. And I did also some practicum work in an inpatient facility in community mental health. So I've worked in most settings. I haven't worked at a VA setting before, so I don't know much about that. I have worked in other settings that make me pretty universal, and I've gotten experience in a lot of different populations, which has been helpful. I have lived experience with depression, self-harm, and suicide risk. So I have some personal and professional background with it, and I use all of my experience and knowledge and lessons learned in all the work that I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for giving us a background of your professional experience. And I also really appreciate you sharing a little bit of personal relevance to the topic. And it seems like you find a spot that really bridges your professional and personal interests together. Oh,
very much. I've been very lucky.
Yeah, thank you. And since you are a licensed psychologist, I'm curious about what are some of the reasons why you chose to be a licensed psychologist, because as counseling psychologists, we have different career paths to choose from. There are folks who pursue academia and folks who pursue a psychologist position at UCCs like you do, and there are folks in private practice, lots of different settings. So I'm curious about what are some of the thinking around choosing the path that you are in right now?
Sure. A few reasons. The first is that the age that most people are when they go to college, that middle adulthood, if you will, or that developmental stage, where people can make some very crucial changes with the right support, professional and personal support. And so I wanted to be a part of that professional support network, if you will, for people in college. And college is now more than before, have a lot more people with severe mental health disorders. And in my experience and the lessons learned, people with more severe illnesses come to college, whereas they didn't before in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and even maybe early 2000s. But now people with mental health issues come to college and are able to thrive. So I want to be a part of virtual counseling here, and being able to provide students free mental health support that's high quality is important to me. And I know that it's for many students, it's the first time ever getting any kind of therapy at all. So I want to make sure that I'm a part of the team that gives them really quality and authentic mental health counseling and support. And being here in Wyoming, I wanted to work in a population that's rural and where the suicide risk was higher, so I could be a part of that change.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. And it seems like the age population really fits with your interest in terms of emerging adults as well as students who are higher risk in the rural communities.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Since our topic is on psychology licensure, would you tell us a little bit about your experience and journey to get licensed? And I know it's a very long process for us to get doctoral degrees and postdoc hours in some states, and different states have different regulations. So personally, I have lots of confusion about how this process would go. So I'm sure our students are very interested in hearing about that.
For sure. To go back to a question you asked a few moments ago, learning from my advisor, Dr. Rachel Navarro, and then from some personal models I had working in practicum, the idea of being a licensed psychologist in a center for me was a better path because I was able to do more outreach, which I have a lot of passion for and a lot of joy to do. So I really wanted to be in a place where I could do outreach. I did not think at the time, in my opinion, it may change, that being a faculty member was where I wanted to put my time in. Not that like I said, that may change in the future, but I'm the type of person that does need some variety in their day. So the ability to be able to do 4 or 5 different things in a day really helps. And so I think that for me, I found that in my work as in a counseling psychology, or excuse me, university counseling center. The path to licensure was, that's interesting. Luckily, I was at a really helpful internship site placement at the University of Akron, and the staff there, all licensed psychologists, and they all came and come from a variety of backgrounds. And they gave us a pretty strong overview of the licensure requirements in different states, including Ohio. For me, I contemplated California and Montana, and here in Wyoming. For other people that we can get licensed in any state, and their license is good everywhere because they're on federal property. And the other part was knowing that once you're licensed, it doesn't just stop. You're required to do CEUs, and you're required to keep learning, thankfully. And the other part of it, the licensure is the cost of it, and seeing if that is the path that you want to go. So there was a bit of reflection on, is this what I want to do? Do I want to get licensed? Do I want to just, can I just continue on and wait, like just do postdoc for a year and then get licensed later? So a lot of those questions I had to ask myself. Is also a lot of it too is once you're licensed in one state, it's not like it's impossible, but it's more challenging to get licensed in other states. So I had to think through a lot of those things. And then the other part too, and I'll get to some more of this later, is postdocs, you typically don't get paid as much as a licensed psychologist. I mean, very rarely do you. So that was also an aspect I needed to think about too. Right.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot to consider in terms of the licensure process. Not only it's a complicated process itself, but every state is different, and every person's career path and goals are different as well. Lots of questions came to my mind. I guess, first of all, I'm really interested in you talking about the decision around doing a postdoc or getting licensed directly or right after your internship. How was the process for you to make that decision? And what are some of the things that you considered or our students should consider?
Right. The first thing was if I wanted to pursue a postdoc that would give me specialized training. I think the largest thought process.
Mm-hmm.
The second was if you are able to find a postdoc that is 1 year, or excuse me, more than 1 year, if you're able to find a 2 or 3 year postdoc, that would at least provide you some type of foundation to live from. For me, I'm from California, so I moved to North Dakota for school.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, I moved to Akron, Ohio for internship. And at that point, I thought, I don't want to keep moving and then have to move someplace in a year, move again if they weren't going to hire. So that was a big part of it too.
Right.
The other aspect of it was salary-wise. I mean, most postdocs don't get paid much more than an intern. Well, depending on where your site is, most postdocs don't get paid much more than an intern. So that was a factor too. And if, in my case, I wanted to work this place I wanted to have an outreach emphasis in the work that I do. There's very, very few postdocs that I saw that had any kind of outreach emphasis on it. Most of the postdoc rotations were about neuropsychology or things like research basis behind it, or group therapy, or something along those lines. There was not a whole lot of options for, or even like a teaching rotation. For me, there wasn't a whole lot of options for outreach. So that tailored my application process a bit more.
Right. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that it's important to figure out what are some of the training experiences that's important to you, and seeing if the postdoc or full-time positions offer those opportunities. Yes,
very much so.
Yeah.
And hopefully you have a good relationship with your internship supervisors, because those supervisors will give you an honest opinion of, could you use another year of training to really like solidify your skill set? Could you use another year of growth? Those types of things are important too.
Right.
For me, the feedback I received was I didn't, whatever I needed to learn, I could learn in a full-time position. A postdoc may not benefit me a whole lot as far as my clinical skills. So that's where I was too. So that was helpful too.
Right. Yeah, that's important to know. Based on different career goals and career paths, sometimes more training is needed, but some other times it's just really not that much more helpful, except for being paid less for another year and having to move.
Yeah, and also too, some postdocs, you're able to have that conversation of, how often do you hire your postdoc trainees? How often do people stay on, that kind of a thing. So this part came up, which was just challenging for me, is once your interviews were over and you received an offer, there was not a whole lot of time you had to make a decision. In some cases, I would interview on a Tuesday and they did want to answer by a Thursday.
Wow.
So for me, that was too much. I couldn't make a decision in 3 days like that. So that was challenging too.
Wow. Yeah, that is challenging because it's different from the internship process where you interview and then you know the results on the same day. And I guess there wasn't any decision that you made in the end. This computer makes it for us.
Like you go where they say.
Yeah. And it seems like it's also different from the doctoral admission process where everybody has April 15th as the deadline to make the final decision. Yeah, that would be challenging.
Exactly. And that just passed. So congratulations to all the people that got in. And that's a really good point too. Not all postdocs are the same. It isn't like internship where there's a specific where you find out there's not like a universal application process. I think that's changing more. I think I only used the match for 1 to 2 postdoc positions. All the rest were per site, so it was a lot different than internship.
Okay, gotcha. That's interesting. So I actually was in the internship match process this past year. And when I was doing my
Yeah.
site search, I noticed that there are some postdoc sites in the system as well. So it sounds like there are some postdoc sites that's AP accredited and in the match process, but are some or a lot more that's not in the APA database, and you just have to reach out and apply individually. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
There is, yeah, the APIC is very helpful. I mean, I at least found out where some sites were. And I honestly, I hope that does change a bit more, because it is more challenging coming from a very structured process with internship and even with applying to graduate school to having this unstructured kind of free-for-all with postdoc. So it's a lot more work on your end. And the other, and that kind of, in a way, it took me out of the internship process in a way, because I think it was 3 months into internship, that's when we started to get job listings from our supervisors at internship saying these are jobs that are available. And it kind of, well, for me, it really took me out of the moment, because I was enjoying my internship year and really learning a lot. And then all of a sudden, stop all that. You need to learn about these jobs. Right.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. It sounds like soon after internship starts, so we have to do this all over again and apply and search and preparing material, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let me think. I have a question in terms of different states have different requirements for postdoctoral hours. So personally, that's something that I'm confused about, because ideally, I am thinking after I finish internship, I would like to find a permanent position. And I know there are some positions that allow you to accrue postdoctoral hours while being hired as a full-time professional, but there are some other positions that's just a 1 year postdoctoral experience that would lead you to licensure, but the employment afterwards is unclear or not guaranteed. And of course, there are some other states that doesn't explicitly require postdoctoral hours. And I know I came from Indiana, and that's one of the states that doesn't require postdoctoral hours, and the process is easier in those states, but that poses some challenges if you want to move to another state in the future. So there are just a lot of factors to consider. So in a state that require postdoctoral hours, how do people find positions that they can accrue postdoctoral hours on the position versus doing a formal postdoc? I don't know if you have any insights about that.
Yeah, what we worked out in Akron, at least, was there was 2 psychologists who led the internship seminar, or excuse me, the licensure seminar. And what those psychologists did was they had us prepare for the most difficult licensure state, and then go that way. So I think that we were looking at New York and California as far as the most challenging states to get hours for, and then we prepared that way. And I know for example, in Wyoming, they would take internship hours plus postdoc hours. When I was hired here, I was able to accrue hours as a postdoc, postdoc hours, even though I was a full-time employee. My job title changed a bit, but that was not a big deal. And I know in other states, it's a lot more challenging because they'll only accept postdoc hours. They want like 2,000 or something like that. Some of them wouldn't take internship hours either, so that's also a challenge too. So what I did was I narrowed it down to 3 different states that I was looking to move to, or I would be okay living with, and then make sure I had hours for those 3 places, and that worked out okay. And also, you need to make sure that if there's an oral exam plus EPPP, that's also a thing to prepare for as well. So yeah, those are just a few factors.
Right.
When it comes to postdoc hours, my understanding is most full-time jobs will hire a licensure eligible person. At the time, this was last year, most jobs that I looked at and found, you were able to accrue hours as a postdoc while working full-time, because I mean, literally you were a postdoc because after your doctorate degree. The other thing was they would give you about a year in order to become licensed, which worked out for me really well. And I think most postdocs are set up that way, but full-time jobs, you just have to negotiate the time to study, the time to get licensed, and then we'll talk more about negotiation as we go along here. But a lot of that is in the hiring process, to negotiate time to prepare and time to get licensed, and making sure that there's a psychologist that can supervise you as well.
Right, right. Yeah, so there are also lots of things going into getting a permanent position where you could be allowed for a year to accrue postdoctoral hours.
Yes, yes. Yeah. And making sure, I think a lot of what happens when you start applying for jobs is, for some, let me say this from my personal opinion. As an ethnic minority graduate, my concern at the time was, oh, I'm just lucky if I get anything. I'm lucky if I get any job at all. I should be grateful for that job. I should be grateful that someone's willing to hire me, which is true and not true. Yes, I'm grateful for the job. You can feel grateful for the opportunity to apply. However, I'm bringing a lot to the table. I'm bringing education. I'm bringing my experience. I'm bringing all of my skills. So not only am I lucky to get a job, they're also lucky to hire me. So that's that type of mentality really enabled me to develop some negotiation skills on the kind of last minute.
Right, right. Yeah, that's very helpful. And I think our students, many of us might feel like we have to go through more hoops or barriers to get to where other people are. But I think it's helpful for them to hear that we also bring a lot to the table, and the multicultural factors, or some of our students are bilingual or bicultural, and I know a lot of university counseling centers really really appreciate the additional expertise that some students bring to the table.
I hope so. If they don't, I don't know if you want to work there. But,
right.
And I mean, everything's a bit different as far as what you bring to the table. Because that experience and well, let me just start over with that. Imposter syndrome is a real thing, and the challenge of that is, I think every grad student has that. Those that maybe identify as an ethnic or sexual minority, or minority in some place, there comes that extra baggage of, well, they might not want to hire me because of this reason or that reason, or will students see me? Are they hiring me as a token minority? They hire me as a token man, a token this, token that. So there's the challenge of falling into that trap of tokenizing yourself, which for me, I need to really assess that, because depending on where you work and the contacts you have, you're able to find out if the place that you're applying to really does value multicultural connection and multicultural knowledge. They really practice from a culturally humble place. And they may not. I think it's really popular for people to say that they're multicultural and they value multiculturalism. And then once you get there, you realize that that's not true. So that's where I think a lot of it comes down to not only doing your own work about where to apply, but doing your own work on meeting people that have worked there or work there now and seeing if that's really true. Because ideally, it's a job you have for a while. you have it for, you know, for at least 3 years, if not longer,
Mhm.
you want to make sure that you're a good fit and they're a good fit for you, which goes back to the value that you have, the value that you add to the position, and the value the position adds to your career and your growth.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's such an important point. Thank you for mentioning that. And I think that's especially important for students in Division 45 to think, really think about how to find a good match, not only for the internship, but also postdoc and permanent position in the future. And I really, really
For sure.
resonate with what you said about it's very popular for sites to say that we embrace multiculturalism, and we welcome students or trainees from diverse background or staff from diverse backgrounds. But when you actually interact with them, there might be signs that you can tell varying degrees of multicultural awareness or competence within the site. So I'm curious about what are some of the tips and experiences that you've used to help you gauge whether that's a good fit for you as a ethnic minority or a minority in other areas.
Sure. The first for me is, well, I was one of the fortunate things that I was able to achieve was as an ethnic minority scholar for APA, you get to meet a lot of the, I don't know how to say this without sounding really like narcissistic. You get to meet a lot of the brighter, you get to meet a lot of other scholars that are identified as ethnic minorities, and with that, you're able to develop relationships with them and learn from them, and figure out where they're coming from and what their experience has been. Most people apply. I mean, there's not that many places to apply. I mean, there's most people you're going to run into some overlap about where you're applying and their experience about it too. So developing some trusted relationships with fellow, in this case, fellow MFP students, and meeting them, learning from the faculty. One of the great opportunities through the MFP program is you get paired with an experienced ethnic minority mentor from another university. And that was so very helpful. They give you a lot of great insight, a lot of personal insight, a lot of professional insight, and a lot of authentic communication, which did a lot of help, a lot of helpful growth. So really just branching out, learning from other people, asking questions, feeling okay with asking really questions that you might think are stupid or silly or whatever it is, asking those questions because you really want to find an answer. So those are some ways. Meeting other people that maybe identify as the same background that I do, and they're all achieving. Those types of folks at least will have some of the same concerns or questions you might have, and asking those questions in a safe place, in a safe relationship, is the ways to negotiate that and learn more about that stuff.
And that seems to kind of really speak to the importance of mentorship and professional relationships with people who might look like us or identify in similar ways as our students, and just really providing, finding those safe places and asking tough questions or silly questions to get those answers.
And it is really humbling too. There are some students who really know all they need to do. I mean, they've already negotiated K Awards, which is an award you get through NIH, I believe, or NIMH. They've already negotiated all these things, and then for me, I am in awe of a lot of the students that really have their stuff together, knowing how to fund themselves, in a way, knowing that they had to develop their own foundation before they moved on. And a lot of the professors may not either have the time or have the opportunity to teach their advisees how to write grants, how to earn awards through NIH or what have you. Networking, learning from other people is so important.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And hopefully our
Mhm.
Division 45 will offer some of those resources as well. And the
Yeah,
mentorship sessions that we do will provide a little bit more resources and access for students who are looking to similar mentors and to ask those questions and finding those connections.
for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for sharing. And I wanted to go back to the piece that it seems really intriguing that you talk about negotiating time to study for EBBB and the
Hmm.
time to prepare for licensure when you are searching for a postdoctoral, either a postdoctoral position or a permanent position after you finish your internship. So how is that negotiation process like? And what are the things that is really important for us to negotiate and get as we move closer to licensure?
Yeah. The first one is tolerance for anxiety,
Okay.
because it is an anxiety-provoking process. One, just
Mm-hmm.
the interviewing process, the application process is already very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Once you once you have the interviews, once you accept the position, then comes the offer.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where for me, the anxiety crept in of, okay, should I just take the first thing that is offered? Do I have any negotiating power in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing is knowing that internship and most postdocs, for example, there is no negotiating power. They have a set schedule that they offer, and that's where you're at. When it comes to a full-time position where you earn hours as a postdoc, you do have negotiating power in there, and hopefully you have a mentor that can talk to you about that. I had a couple of different people I spoke to about that. And so you are able to negotiate a few things. One, the starting salary, you're able to negotiate that. Two, you also have the option to negotiate a bump in pay after you become licensed. Three, able to negotiating your expense to travel for taking the EBBB, for example. So where I'm at in Wyoming, there is only one location in this state where you can take the EBBB, and that's very far. Most places you have to go to, at least here, you have to go to Colorado, which is the next state over. But you're able to negotiate travel expenses to and from. You're able to negotiate the mileage and all that stuff. And some postdocs or some full-time positions will provide you funds to buy a prep software or prep program. I didn't really need to do that. I was able to get some hand-me-down materials, which worked out a lot. So those are some things that you can negotiate. For example, just your starting pay after you get licensed, time to study, travel expenses to and from the test, and then also, and this is a bit of a tangent, but also continuing education and continuing like funds to go to conferences, funds to take classes and things, because you do need to earn your CEs somehow. So that's another thing you can negotiate as part of your salary, which should typically, obviously you can't do that in internship. I mean, sometimes they give you time off for dissertation and whatnot. And sometimes postdocs will offer you some funds for travel. However, it's usually a set thing. There is no negotiating power. But when you apply for a full-time job, there is you do have some opportunity to negotiate. And it's strange. If you've never done it before, it's really strange to be able to say to someone, yeah, so actually, I think I want to earn more than what you're offering, or I think with my skill set would earn a higher pay rate than this. Or if you have the opportunity to learn what other postdocs, or excuse me, what other positions in the area offer, you can use that as a base.
Right.
you also can look at, I believe most universities, not most, I know some universities, salaries of publics are able to use those as some kind of a range too.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was mainly about tolerating the anxiety of having the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, once I was able to do that, it got a lot easier, or more manageable, I should say, not easier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing. I think these are some of the points that we don't usually think about until we get to that point. So I think it's really helpful for us to hear there are a couple of things and very important things for us to negotiate in order to ensure that we can have the time and have the resources to get licensed and continue to be licensed. Okay, welcome back, Dr. Brionez. We had some technological difficulties yesterday, so we're resuming the mentorship session today. So thank you yesterday for providing us very just invaluable advice and suggestions on the issues to consider when students are pursuing licensure, and specifically how to, what are the things to negotiate when we get a job offer. And
Sure.
I'm sure that's, that will be really, really helpful for students who are gonna come up to that stage of their professional training.
I hope so. And Yue, thanks for your time as well for coming back on today too.
Yeah, sure. Let me see. One topic that I wanted to ask you is, since we talked about licensure and clinical training, the journey is long and very complex at times.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you maintain a work-life balance? Especially, I remember we talked about the tolerance for anxiety, and anxiety is an unavoidable part of this journey. So what are some of the tips and experience that you had to maintain work-life balance?
The first was, one thing I wanted to do is I wanted to defend my dissertation before internship. So that was a big deal for me. And I did sacrifice some of my social and family time in order to do that. And that other people may not want to do that. They may not really have that desire to defend before internship. I did. And so once I got to internship, my life was a lot different. For one, you don't have, for the most part, you don't have class during internship. So depending on your work schedule, for us, we were 8 to 5 at the University Counseling Center there. And then once 5 o'clock hit, we were done. The staff at Akron was very, they made sure they really want us to leave. They would constantly come by our offices and say, you shouldn't be here late, go home, day ends at 5, that type of thing. So that made it really easy to develop a work-life balance to where I started to have to, or want to, excuse me, wanted to do things after work that would contribute to my wellness, whether it was hiking, walking, just getting a coffee or a tea or something, or going to exercise or something like that. All those opportunities were there. And especially in Akron near Cleveland, there's a lot more to do there, art-wise and culture-wise. So there's a lot more things to explore. And I spent a lot of time making sure that I recovered, if you will, from grad school. Because I think there is that element of recovery, because unless you're in the cohort, you don't know all that goes into it. And it's a lot of work.
Right. Yeah. I think that's something that can be a goal for a lot of students. And personally, I'm aiming for at least getting most of my dissertation done before internship, and then that seems to be help a lot when we go on internship.
Yeah, very much. One of the most challenging things for me about internship was staying in one place the entire day. As a grad student, you don't do that. I mean, you're doing 3 or 4 things, 5 things, and you're going from place to place to place. So your days are pretty varied. Once you get to internship, you're mostly indoors for most of the day. And for me, it's really challenging.
Right. Yeah, that's such a good point. That raised a question for me in terms of how was the transition like, being a doctoral student wearing different hats and sometimes you're running around the building throughout the day, to having a more set schedule and sitting in the same room or position most of the day. I'm sure it comes with kind of pros and cons in terms of the adjustment. So what was that like for you?
For me, I didn't I didn't like it. I really wanted to, for me, I need to do a variety of things during the day in order to feel good, to feel unstuck. So for me, it was really challenging. So I made sure I took on a lot of outreach activities. I didn't even care what it was. I just did whatever outreach activity was there, anything to get out of the building, anything to go between buildings, whatever it was.
Right.
And my cohort members in internship had the opposite feeling. They liked one place the entire day. They liked having a pretty structured, pretty regimented day.
Right.
And so it differs for me. For me, I didn't like it. I like the idea of having some variety. And so that transition was challenging. The other thing is too, it's once again moving to a new place. Moving to Ohio, I didn't know anyone there. You have your cohort members. Hopefully you all get along. If you don't, it's more challenging. Hopefully the staff is kind to you.
Right.
If it's not as challenging, hopefully they care about you. I know some sites, I don't know if the story is overblown or not, but one hears horror stories about these sites that work their interns to the bone, and that's just what they're there for.
Right.
I did not have that experience. I felt like a valued part of the team there, that made that transition a lot easier. And also, Ohio is a pretty multicultural place. So for me, that made it even easier too. Grand Forks and North Dakota, there's not as much variety of ethnicities in that area inherently, and in Ohio and Cleveland and Akron, there's a lot more. So for me, that just took away a lot of the stress, because there was just a lot less of either perceived or real racism, and either perceived or actual microaggressions and things. I experienced that a lot less in a place that the ethnicity and the cultural makeup was a lot more varied.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's something that ethnic racial minority students and professionals will always face throughout their lifetime and their professional career, in terms of the larger community and cultural, how that contributes to our well-being and our sense of fitting in, or being accepted and being supported in that environment.
Yeah, very much. And that research would support that. I don't think it's something that people are making up. Research would support that. Ethnic and gender minorities, ethnic minorities and sexual minorities have different experiences in less and more homogenous cultures. It's just a different experience. Right.
And perhaps that's something to consider as well when considering where to apply for internship, and how we can get the most out of the experience.
Yeah. And for me, another kind of easy thing for me is I didn't really have any geographic locations, geographic limitations. So I had that was easier for me too.
Right.
And one of the reasons I applied at this job here is because it's close to Denver, which is like an hour flight to California where my family is. So it's easy to get there for holidays and things.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of things to consider as we move around throughout our professional journey.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. I'm also curious about earlier when you said about the professional experience, and especially pursuing for licensure. Now you're at the other side of the tunnel, so to speak. What are some of the things that you wish you knew when you were a student, just about to go on internship perhaps, or just starting to thinking about license?
Sure. Let me think. Give me a moment here.
Okay.
I think if one thing, I don't know if doc programs are supposed to do this or do this or not. There is not really, as far as I know, a whole lot of emphasis on studying for the ISHPOP while you're in school.
Right.
However, it would be helpful if either the department or the faculty would have provided some kind of quick overview of what's required of you, because there are some elements of the studying of the questions that are asked and things that you don't deal with a lot. You don't deal with a lot in school, or if you do deal with it, it's like it's once and never again.
Right.
So there's that piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
So staying current, I think, was a pretty good one. I think now with APACS helping out a lot, students are pretty aware of your Triple P Part 2 coming out. So I think that's hopefully won't be a surprise to people.
Mm-hmm.
The cost is a big thing.
Right.
If you don't have contacts that can give you leftover materials, it is a lot of money. I mean, some of the programs, you can pay thousands of dollars for the psych prep or AATBS or whatever program that you do study with. They're a lot of money. It's a lot of time.
Right.
There's that thing. So
Mm-hmm.
let me think of what else would have been helpful. If you are going to pursue a faculty position, it is a good idea to get licensed anyway, because a lot of the students would need people to supervise them, and unless you're a licensed psychologist, you can't do that. The other thing is too, and this is what I did not know. So I don't know other states, but specifically Wyoming, you have to have 4 years of experience before you could supervise someone else on your own license. So
Right.
that was a really big shock to me, because I was like, all right, cool, I'm licensed, I can start to supervise people.
Right.
And technically you can, however, you're supervising under someone else's license. And so it's not that much different than internship.
Right.
If you want to, I don't know what other states are, but for here, I have to keep practicing for 4 more years. So I wouldn't be able to supervise anybody till 2023. So that's a long time. So that's something that was disappointing.
Right.
The other thing too is even though there is like a benefit to, like, for example, signing off on your own notes, not having to worry about people looking over your shoulder as much, there is extra responsibility of knowing that no one is looking over your shoulder. I mean, it is all on you for the most part, what happens.
Right.
If you're in private practice, it literally is all on you. So there is that extra, I wouldn't say stress, but responsibility level that if you're not prepared for it, then you may want to wait a bit to get supervised. That, to keep in mind, CEUs are still an additional cost, which for the most part, I mean, I've negotiated to get that covered here, so that's not as bad, thankfully. But if you don't, then you have to pay for that stuff as well.
Right.
The other one too is, I think it's becoming more popular to do like Zoom or Skype based or whatever it is, counseling. And that's all helpful. However, just be aware of like state jurisdictions and like making sure that you can still practice and still provide counseling over the internet, which works out fine too.
Right.
Let me think. The importance of a study buddy too. Like if you're studying on your own, it's a lot harder. Some people like it better. For me, I worked with a buddy of mine, and we had like a specific plan that we followed, which made it a lot easier.
Okay.
So really have like a regimented, structured schedule of studying.
Right.
And yeah. Oh, and don't listen to the horror stories about people failing, because I did that once. That was the worst. So yeah, you read some scary stories about people like failing by a few points, and so yeah, just try and ignore all that and stick to your plan and do the best you can.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah. Those are really helpful. Yeah.
1 second, I'm gonna drink coffee really quick. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Thank you so much for all of these insights. That's very helpful. Speaking of EPPP, I'm also wondering what would be the timeline? Because I personally, I heard different versions of how many hours you should devote it to preparing for EPPP. So I feel like some of our students are confused about once we start internship and looking ahead in terms of planning everything. How did you do it, and what would be a reasonable timeline for somebody to get on license?
Yeah. The timeline I negotiated when I applied here was, I was hired in August, and I negotiated to have till October of 2019. So that was a year plus 2, so 14 months.
Right.
I took it and passed it in January. So I studied.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't study it for 5 months though. I didn't start studying until, I don't know. It was all I can tell you is just 200 hours of studying.
Okay.
That's what we did. Because we planned it out, so it was 200 hours and nothing more.
Mm-hmm.
A colleague of ours cited some research that said anything more than 200, 250 hours is like a loss of return as far as studying goes.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that my buddy and I made the plan is we studied X many hours per week, a different topic per week, and then we studied approximately 200 hours. I think give or take a few hours here and there because holidays and things kind of took us off our schedule sometimes.
Right.
So we studied 200 hours. I want to say we started in October and we finished in January or something, something like that.
Right.
So that's the timeline that we used. We did it while we were both working. My friends did a postdoc. I was at this job, so we both did it after hours. We spent about 2 hours or so each time period, and then we quizzed each other. I think the first the first 150 hours or so was all studying the materials from the program that we used, and then the last hours were, in addition to taking some of the practice tests, which were really helpful. And I'm not going to say what program because I'm not really about plugging anything. However, the application we used, the questions were like almost verbatim what was on the actual Teachable P2. So the practice tests were extremely helpful. And one thing, this is a tip that I wish I learned before. So the way it broke down, you take 4 practice tests and then like a practice test that you don't, how it works is the practice test, you answer the question and then it tells you if you're right or wrong, and then you learn from that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then as you go along, the tests get harder, and then the last one you take is one that you don't know the score until the very end. It's just like the real test. It gives you a time limit like the real test does. That's really helpful. So the first test I took, I like totally bombed it. I got like 30% correct, which is like pretty bad. And then steadily I kept getting better till like the very end. I think I scored in the high 80s, which was pretty good. And then, so just because you like fail the first one doesn't mean you're going to like fail. You might get that fear that you're going to fail out. That didn't happen. I just kept plugging along. So so 2 things. We just had a study schedule. We did the practice tests, and we quizzed each other a lot, and that helped out tremendously. So those things I would say, and not to get too worried if you don't pass the first test right away, or if you do, they get progressively harder. So if you get like 90 in the first one, and then the last one you get like a 60, it's because the tests get progressively harder.
Gotcha. Okay.
And they're not going to teach you everything. I would say the programs, materials aren't going to teach you everything, because on the test itself, there is questions that they're testing out for like the new version. So there's stuff I had no idea of. I never even heard of those concepts when I took the test. It was not on any of the materials, not on anything that we studied. So that was brand new. I think like they don't tell you which ones are the practice preparing for the next version of the test questions. So
Gotcha.
even with that, even with the test itself, to just keep a steady pace. Don't spend too much time on things that you're not sure of. Just keep answering and going along. And if you're super sure you know the right answer, just flag it and come back to it. That'll make sense when you take the practice test, because you can flag some questions and come back to them.
Gotcha.
But it's better to answer everything first. That way you don't miss out on any extra points because you ran out of time.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And earlier you said that you negotiated 14 months to study for EPPP with your job. So how does that look like? Is it additional hours during your 40 hours a week to study for the test, or is it just a time frame for you to pass the exam?
It's the latter. It's the time frame to pass the exam.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. I essentially studied like after hours, like after work ended. My friend and I we'd go on Google Hangout and study.
Gotcha.
And then sometimes on weekends, let me think of what else. Yeah, so that's what I did. And then and I didn't need that much time. I mean, I finished past it in January, so I basically had however many months.
Right.
It was like not for a while. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, and it's definitely good to give yourself a couple of extra month and then feel like you're cutting on the deadline. Yeah. And it seems like we do need to take some hours after work during that period of time to study for EGGP, and that's something to be prepared for and thinking about ahead of time.
For sure. And again, having a structured time, not to, that's where anxiety can come in, because I could have like got really nervous and I studied like 10 hours a day for like every day. I would just burn myself out. So I just kept with my schedule and tolerated that anxiety of, I might not know this, I might not know that. And it's true, you might not. And sleeping is important. So So try and develop a healthy habit of sleeping and eating well if you can.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all of those valuable suggestions. And
for sure.
And what I learned a lot from you is a lot of time management and also emotional management, and acknowledging that things can get very anxiety provoking and things can get sometimes scary, and we have those I guess each of us might have those automatic thoughts sometimes come in to scare us off, but we as psychologists may be able to use some of the tools to help ourselves and encourage ourselves to be more tolerant and pace things out and stick to our schedule. And it seems like in the long run, it does pay off.
For sure, yes. And it's, you want to be able to, I mean, at least for me, like it's difficult for me to like just clinically to do counseling and therapy, and like not practice the same things that I work with clients about or counsel clients to do. So I want to make sure I'm practicing in a healthy way. That way I'm not just like a hypocrite to my client.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you practice what we preach, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's all of the questions that I have for now. And I have learned tremendously about things that come after internship and moving towards licensure. And thank you so much for the suggestions and the insights and sharing your own experiences. I think that's going to be really, really helpful for students and younger or early professionals to hear that.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Yue, for the opportunity to speak with you. And I hope you kick butt in your program and in EGGP and all your future endeavors.
Thank you so much. And the last thing I was going to say is that as a part of our mentorship program, every mentor agreed to take 3 mentees. If any individual mentees are interested in contacting Dr. Brionez to talk further about some of the topics that he has shared, you all can email us to our Division 45 mentor Gmail account, and we will connect you to our mentors and set up those relationships to further mentorship and further the support going forward.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm looking forward to. So yeah, it'd be great to connect with people and pass on any knowledge that I have and learn from you all too. So for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for taking 2 hours from both your Saturday and Sunday to talk with us.
You're fine. You're all good. I still got time to go do stuff, so we're all good.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. And we look forward to keep in touch with you. And thank you for being our mentor both last year and this year. We really, really appreciate your support and your contribution in our program.
For sure. You're very welcome, and take care.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.